my friend. Welcome back to the Stronger Than Your Pain Masterclass. I am so grateful that you are here. We're spending time together so that we can become stronger than our pain. We're doing that by learning how we can overcome self-doubt, anxiety, and depression. And I want to start this video as I do all my other ones. I'm sure you know what that is by now. This is week 4. We've spent some good time together. I am grateful for you, because you are spending time here with me when you could be spending it elsewhere. Most importantly, however, you're spending it on you because you are focused on truly becoming stronger than your pain. And you want to use that strength for you to have the strength for two. Self-mastery, as we've discussed, is not a selfish road. It is one of selfless love and caring for others, because the only way that we can take care of other people is if we are strong enough to take care of ourselves. And here you are, focused on doing just that. And for that reason, I am so grateful for you. So thank you for being here. This week, we are wrapping up the mastery cycle. We are on week 4, and we're going to spend some time in lesson 4, the summary, pulling it all together. These are my favorite videos because we have talked in part on thoughts, words, and actions in individual pieces. But life does not exist that way. Life is one big moving mesh of chaos that we're trying to provide some personal order to, which means it's hard to isolate thought, word, and actions. They all string together in real time, and we have to make big decisions quickly. How do we do that? The summary video helps us understand how our thoughts, words, and actions come together within the mastery cycle, how visualizing the best version of ourselves can help us grab hold of that to make the best decision right now. So I'm excited to jump into this summary video. I hope you are too. Let's get rolling. Let's, of course, as always, go over the agenda. We got a lot to cover. So we're going to move pretty quickly, but again, we're not going to do so in a manner that will skip anything, because the information here is valuable to us, and we want to make sure that we're absorbing it as much as we can. So, of course, we're going to wrap up the mastery cycle. And when I say wrap up, I don't mean we're never going to discuss it again. As we discussed before, this is the foundation of everything that we are doing and building upon. That's why this is module 1. But we are going to talk about the mastery cycle again. Purposeful repetition. We are going to cover our thoughts, our words, our actions, and how those things lead to our destiny. We're going to cover the fact that, man, it is all on you. And we'll talk about what that really means, as scary as it can be. And as always, we're going to wrap with an exercise. This exercise is going to be a little bit different. Each exercise that we cover in their own lessons, thought, words, and actions, are more of a tool that we're going to slap down on the table and say, bam, life happened. I have a tool set now to be able to combat that and take control of my life. Whereas this one is more of a thought-provoking exercise to get to know who you are right now and how we can start to visualize who we become in the future. And each module summary is going to have an exercise. Each module summary is going to have an exercise like that. So we're going to cover that today, and I love it. Help give me a glimpse to who I am inside and who I want to be. So this is a cool one. I'm excited to get there. But before we do, let's jump to the mastery cycle. Let's review this again. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Your thought becomes your destiny through all of those actions. And of course, as Lao Tzu, ancient Chinese philosopher, 500 BC, gave that beautiful piece of philosophical knowledge to us in that linear manner, I have critiqued it to be more of a cyclical manner, because life within itself has small destinies. The ultimate destiny is looking back on your life and saying, how did I live it? What will I be remembered for? What is my legacy? What am I leaving behind? That is the ultimate destiny. But within that, we have our micro destinies. For example, where you are right now is a current existing live destiny, and everything you have done up to this point has gotten you to your current destiny. The main things that have gotten you there, moment to moment to moment: thoughts, words, and actions. And as we look at the mastery cycle, we can see that our thoughts, words, and actions are those daily things that we can do moment to moment to moment. The habit, character, destiny are what? They're outcomes. There's a beautiful quote, a man does not control his future, he controls his habits, which control his future. Yes, but in order to control your habits, you need to control your thoughts, words, and actions. Habits are an outcome of those three preceding things. So if we truly want to grab hold of our destiny, we have to recognize that this moment, which is truly all we have, the past is gone, the future is not here, we are right now in the present. The only thing that we can control, thoughts, words, and actions. And that is the power of the mastery cycle. And that is why we are focused on those three things, because as we divide the mastery cycle in two, thoughts, words, and actions are the daily moment-to-moment executables. The habits, character, and destiny are the outcomes. And as we've discussed, and we will discuss in further lessons and modules, the process proves the outcome. So if you want a strong destiny 3, 5, 10 years out, that is dependent upon what you do right now to get you there. Good habits will get you there. How do you create good habits? Thoughts, words, actions. Repetitiously will create that to then develop character and ultimately get you to where you want to be. So to wrap that real quick, your destiny right now is a summation of everything you've done. You want to change it 3, 5, 10 years out. Change what you're doing, thought, word, action. You will then develop habit, character to get you to that destiny. That is the power of the mastery cycle. And who sits at the center of that? You. Current version of you is there right now. Replace that with the best version of you. As we talked about in the previous tools, name to aim. What does the best version of you look like? Put that person inside of the mastery cycle and aim yourself towards that person and think right now, what would that person think, speak, and do? And that continues to drive the mastery cycle forward, as we're going to see at the end of this thing. And I love this visual representation. So let's dive into our thoughts in a little bit more depth now. Not as much as we did before, but let's tie these things together. So our thoughts, we have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. We have the National Science Association saying that we have anywhere between 12 and 60,000 thoughts. And while that is crazy, what's even crazier, 95% are repetitious thoughts. That's where the habits come from. 80% are negative. It's kind of a scary thought, because if we think about, hey, if thoughts equal destiny, are you telling me that my up to 60,000 thoughts a day, 80% being negative, means I'm going to have a negative destiny? I would say yes. Other than everything we've covered thus far, now you have tools to control that thought process, to no longer succumb to the negativity that is our natural evolutionary predisposition or our default setting. So when we ask ourselves, why would this be the case? Why would up to 60,000 thoughts, 85% or 80% of those be negative? Why? It is an evolutionary predisposition for survival. It's a survival mechanism. Throughout our hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, negativity has played a more vital role in keeping our species alive. Negativity is far more potent in our brains. We remember a lot more negativity than we do positive, simply because it is a survival mechanism. And as we recognize that, the importance of recognizing the why behind these motivational and philosophical things is so that we can make the connection. And when we have these negative thoughts, we can now recognize, like, oh, that's just because I'm human. It's not because I'm a negative person and I have out of control thoughts, which makes me a bad human. It's like, absolutely not. You are simply just human. And so as we begin to recognize, like, this is just part of our evolutionary DNA, it is baked within you throughout your ancestry. Okay, great. I'm not a bad person. I'm just having my evolutionary predisposition rise to the surface. Now I need to separate myself from it. We're going to talk about how. But that's it. That is the purpose of recognizing the why. Your natural default setting across common humanity is going to be negative. So if we want to change our trajectory and our destiny and really grab hold of that. Let's recognize it for what it is. Let's not beat ourselves up about having negative thoughts. Let's find a way to separate ourselves from them and then say, now I'm going to be the one in control. Let's do this. And that is where the thought word action comes into play. So when it comes to the kind of thought process we need to have, again, the evolutionary predisposition is towards the negative, not necessarily a growth perspective that we need if we are truly trying to become stronger than our pain and grow into the best person that we can be in order to do that. So when we look at the two mindsets that we can develop, again, Carol Dweck out of Stanford University, doctor of psychiatry there, she gave us these wonderful definitions of what a growth mindset is. Because while the term growth mindset is kind of universal, she has specific definitions for a growth and fixed, and I love what she has to say. So let's review those again. Growth. In a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just a starting point, and this is the liberating part of this mindset that we need to develop. Everything that has happened in the past does not dictate what your future is going to be like. Everything that has happened that you have done has gotten you to where you are now. Great. This is your new starting point. Do not let that be the determining trajectory towards the desired destiny. Now you can say with a growth mindset, I'm starting at zero. It doesn't matter what has happened in the past. I'm grateful for the lessons that I learned, whether I'm happy about what happened or not. I'm here right now. Where do I want to go? Start from zero, move in that direction. That is the beauty and the liberating power of a growth mindset. She says, this view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. Of course, the love of learning recognizes that, hey, I'm going to fail in this process, but failure is just this, a learning opportunity. It is simply to teach me how to continue to get myself where I want to be, what not to do, what to do. That is the power of the growth mindset. Now, in contrast, here's the fixed mindset, and I have it coming across just like that for a reason. She defines this way. A fixed mindset describes children, which I love that little addition there. That's typically the mindset of a child, and adults, though, who believe their intelligence, talents, and personalities are fixed traits that cannot grow. They believe that they are born with a certain skill and ability and are unable to improve their abilities over time. I have been a victim of that mentality. This is just who I am. I can't change. I want to be somebody better, but I just don't think that that's in me. BS, my friend. That is absolutely not the case. I am living proof. I have seen it in countless friends, family members, clients. I have seen this all over the place. If you want to change, you can. But first, you have to get rid of that negative, fixed mindset, which we naturally come by. Again, common humanity, evolutionary predisposition. That is natural. We have to make the conscious decision to say, no, I've got a growth mindset now. Who I am is simply a starting point. Where I am right now is simply my starting point. Whoever I want to become, whatever it is I want to do, I can. I'm starting here, and I'm going to create the path to get there. Main things that I can control, thought, words, and actions in the proper trajectory. But in order to do that, we first have to stop where we are now, or the current movement that we have, and say, I'm starting. I am restarting right now. This is my start point. And so we have to, again, make that conscious decision, grab hold of the growth mindset, and tell yourself, this is the way I'm thinking now. Anything that has happened in the past, I'm grateful for. Let it be what it was. I can change my future and take hold of my destiny. It is up to you. So now let's talk a little more about how we can do that with our thought process. I want to talk about stimulus and response, which we talked about in a little bit more depth in the thought lesson. But stimulus in response is life and reaction. Life is the stimulus. Your response is exactly that, your response. And only one of those things is going to be affected by you. You only have control over one of those things. It is not the stimulus. Life is going to happen the way it's going to happen. The only thing you have control over is your response. So when we look at our thoughts in that regard, we have to recognize that thoughts in and of themselves have no value. They are neutral. That is how we can have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. If each thought had a specific positive or negative value, we would just be run by those things. We have to recognize that our thoughts are neutral and we are the ones that give them their value. So how? How do we give them that value? That a value is associated with our emotions. And I want to differentiate emotions from feelings because while they are intimately intertwined and virtually inseparable, our emotions are more of that natural response that we have within. Our feeling is more of the conscious feeling and decision that we make based off of those emotions. So when it comes to our thoughts, we have an event happen in life. That is the stimulus. We then have our emotions that arise that assign the positive or negative value to that thought. From there, we typically have a feeling that leads to a behavior. And so the way that we need to control that thought process to make sure that we are grabbing hold of what comes next, the self-talk, the speaking, the verbal representation of that thought, and then the action, we need to create as much space between stimulus and response as we can. Life is going to happen. If you immediately give your knee-jerk, or as we covered, as I call it, a me-jerk reaction, you typically become the jerk because oftentimes that first response that you give is not the one that you would have given had you had some thought, some time to make a better decision. That's a me-jerk reaction. So as you create the space between stimulus and response, you allow yourself to slow down and think about the mastery cycle for a second. Let's make the thought, word, action decisions, not based on who's in there now, but who I want to be at the center of this, the best version of me. How would that person think, speak, act? Yes, I'm having these emotions of rage, for example, but I don't want to act according to that rage. I don't want my emotions to be the deciding factor in my actions. I want to be the one in control of my actions, not have my emotions. And when I say that, I'm not saying ignore your emotions, bottle them up. Absolutely not. Recognize your emotions. Feel your emotions. But don't lose control of your emotions and let them into the driver's seat. As you create that space between stimulus and response, your thought process becomes more controlled as you level out your emotions and you let them settle for a moment. You think, what would the best version of me think, speak, and do right now? Great. I will go and do those things. I will think this way. I will speak this way. I will not speak out of anger or malice simply because I'm feeling that way. I want to make sure that my relationship remains intact. So I'm going to be loving and caring even though I'm infuriated. That is what stimulus and response does. We have to create that space. We do that through breathing. We do that through asking ourselves, what would the best version of me do right now? We do that, as we're going to discuss in another module, by recognizing and controlling our triggers. I used the example before of mine is overly tired. And when I'm overly tired, my thoughts run amok because my emotions are extremely out of whack because I'm just not getting enough sleep. And when I recognize that, I say, you know what? I'm creating as much space between stimulus and response as I can. I'm not making any critical decisions until I get some sleep. I just can't because everything else is out of control. And I have lived within that trigger long enough to recognize that. And again, we'll talk about how to do that in the future modules. But as you create that space between stimulus and response, you can truly ask yourself, not how will I react, but how should I react? Not based on current you, but based on desired future you, best self. How would that person react to this? The more space we create between stimulus and response, the more control we have, long story short. Everything I just said could be summed up with that. That is where control lies. And over time, you will be able to create more space between stimulus and response in less and less time. You just grab hold through practice. And that is the point of all this We talked about this before. Knowledge is not power unless it is applied. And it is the same thing here. You have to let life be the ultimate training ground and say, ooh, look at this opportunity that I have now to create space between stimulus and response. Let's do that. Let's breathe. Let's go for a walk. Let's step away. Let's mentally push out the negative. Let's grab hold of my thought, words, and actions and create that space. I feel like I could spend an entire hour talking about the importance of that, but I'm going to keep moving forward. We got a lot to cover. But create space between stimulus and response. Allow yourself to grab hold of the control of your emotions and thoughts and ask yourself, what would the best version of me do now? Do that thing. Think that way, speak that way, act that way. Power of stimulus and response. And as we covered, in more depth in the thought lesson, I want to touch on attitude because I grew up with, hey, watch your attitude. Don't give me that attitude. You need a better attitude. Never truly understanding what that meant. So I kind of dismissed attitude. As an adult now, raising my kids, I'm like, don't give me that attitude. And I find myself doing those same things. But now I'm trying to put together the why. What is so important about attitude? Number one, attitude is 100% of what you can control. And here's why. If you look at the definition of attitude, it is defined as a settled way of thinking or feeling. We just talked about the power of our thoughts. What feeds our thoughts are emotions, tightly, inseparably intertwined with our feelings. So settled way of thinking or feeling about someone or something, typically reflected in a person's behavior. Think about the first part of the mastery cycle. What can we control moment to moment to moment? Our thoughts, our words, our actions, what feed our thoughts, our emotions, and our feelings. That then dictates our behavior. Attitude just summed all of that up in one freaking word. Attitude. If we could sum up our thoughts, our words, our actions in one word, it would be just that. Attitude. So as we ask ourselves in the moment, what can we identify with in how I'm thinking, feeling, speaking, acting? Ask yourself, do I have a good attitude? Is the attitude that I have right now appropriate towards what I want to achieve? What would the best version of me say to myself right now? What would that best version of me have as their attitude? Is mine in alignment with that? Is my attitude making everybody else around me better? Is it making me better, or is it dragging me down into a hole? And I will be honest with you, I am guilty of that all the time, and I have to create space between stimulus and response to ask myself that question. What is my attitude like? That is super, super important because it sums up the first actionable part, moment to moment to moment of the mastery cycle. You want to change your trajectory. You want to grab hold of the destiny you want. Watch your attitude. And if that's not motivational enough, check this out. I want you to assign a number to each letter in attitude, A1, B2, C3, etc. Add up attitude. What do you get? Freaking 100%, baby. And that is nonsensical, motivational math. I understand. But it works. It's cool. It's fun. It helps illustrate the power of that. Attitude equals 100%. You can't do that with every word, So take advantage of that one. Put that one in your pocket and use that for the next time you want to motivate a friend or a family member. Attitude is 100%. Thought, words, feelings, actions wrapped up into one word, attitude. Watch your attitude, and you will be able to grab hold of yourself as you create space between stimulus and response. So that is the first part of the summary, being our thoughts. And now, where do our thoughts go from there? They go to our words. So let's talk about the power of our words. And when I talk about this, I'm not necessarily talking about the words that you use with everybody else. Yes, those are important. But what's more important are the words that we use with ourselves. Again, remember the purpose here. Overcome self-doubt, anxiety, depression, so that we can become stronger than our pain. That strength for you then becomes the strength for two, and you cannot have the strength for two until you develop the strength for you. So everything we're focused on here is for your betterment, is to be able to grab hold of the version of you inside, that best version, and figure out a way to get to that person. So when we're talking about our words, the words that we use with ourselves are self-talk. Super, super important and inseparable from our thought process, really. That is why the thought is so important to grab hold of, because it immediately feeds into how am I speaking to myself. And when it comes to our words that we use with ourselves, they truly are death by paper cuts. You've heard the saying, sticks and stones might break my bones, but words may never hurt me. That is only true when we're talking about somebody else's words. Let those roll off like water off a duck's back, man. That stuff doesn't matter. Who cares what everybody else says about you? What you say about you, on the other hand, is super important. And having been someone that had such negative self-talk during my suicidal depression in my late teens and early 20s, I can go back now and recognize, oh my gosh, look what that did to me. And I kept telling myself, Alex, you're useless. Alex, you're a burden. Alex, people would be better without you here. And that self-talk led to that suicidal depression and the actions that align with that state. It was not good, and it started with my thought process intimately intertwined with my negative self-talk that dictated the destiny at 18 of putting blade to flesh. Your self-talk matters. Please, please, please recognize that. And so as we analyze that, I want you to think about your self-talk in this manner. Would you speak to a loved one, a family member, a friend, even a stranger for that matter, in the way that you speak to yourself? The reason that's so important is because it gives us a little bit better perspective. If I spoke to my wife, my children, my friends, my family in the manner that I spoke to myself back in the day, and guilty sometimes the way that I still speak to myself, my wife and I would probably not be together. My kids would need therapy, and I wouldn't have any friends. And I know you know what I mean. It can be that disrespectful. It can be that dark. It can be that berating and belittling. That is not okay. The relationship that we have with ourselves is the longest, most authentic relationship we're going to have. You got to make it a good one. And words of affirmation, how we speak to ourselves, is a massive part of that. We have to take care. So ask yourself that question. How do I speak to other people? Do I speak to myself the same way? And then flip that on its head and ask yourself, hey, if somebody else came up and spoke to me the way that I speak to myself, what would I do? Would I allow that? Would I be friends with that person? Because, man, I'll tell you, if somebody came up and spoke to me the way that I speak to myself in dark times, dude, we'd fight right there on the spot. Nobody is allowed to disrespect me that way. Okay, well then why am I allowed to disrespect myself that way? Not okay. We have to recognize that within. Just because nobody is there to judge the things that we say to ourselves but ourselves, we are judge, jury, and executioner. We need to be the ones who are fully aware of that self-talk and change it, again, based on the desired outcome, the destiny, the person that we want to be. The best version of me is going to speak to me with love. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard and constructively criticizing, because it will be. You got to be better, and that is not easy, but it is going to be loving, the same way I would speak to the child version of me, my daughters. I will not motivate them with fear and belittlement. It will be uplifting, empowering, encouraging. Same way we need to speak to ourselves. And I love this quote by Rumi: raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder. I am often guilty of trying to grow myself with thunder. And that is what we need to watch and grab hold of and say, no. Not the thunder today, my friend. We are growing with rain. And we need to let that love rain down on us. And that just came to me. What a beautiful pun. Sorry for that one. So as we analyze this, hey, how are you speaking to yourself? This allows us to gain a third-party perspective. And that is what we need to do. We need to be able to take a step back from ourselves, put ourselves in the stands of the stadium, and view ourselves and say, hey, look at how he's thinking, look at how he's speaking, look at his actions. Are they a true reflection of who he's trying to become? If not, no worries. Let's grab hold of that growth mindset. Start now. Where do we want to go? And then we start talking to ourselves in that manner. We start thinking that way. That self-talk needs to be that reflection of the desired outcome. And what I call this is becoming a subjective spectator. Subjective spectating on yourself to say, hey, what's going on in there? What is that self-talk really looking like? How is this going to affect his actions? Are his words uplifting, empowering, encouraging, direct towards the outcome that it needs to be? Or are they belittling, berating, abusive? And would anybody else be allowed to speak to him like that? What if he did that to somebody else? Use that subjective spectating perspective to analyze yourself. And this is where that constructive criticism comes in. I'm not saying like, oh, it's okay, Alex, no consequences to what you're doing. There are great consequences that we need to recognize. I'm not going to go put my nose on the wall and put myself in timeout, but I need to recognize the consequence of not changing is I will not reach my desired destiny. And I have to recognize that and bring that to the forefront right here and look at it in the face and say, damn, if I don't change, nothing changes. And I don't want to stay on this trajectory. So again, let's grab hold of that growth mindset. All right, Alex, that wasn't good. Let's change it. No problem. Start now, move forward. And we talked about doing this in the self-talk, Power of Your Words lesson. The scientific studies that reflect how to do that past, present, and future, because becoming a subjective spectator allows us to grab hold of that over all modes of time. And why is that so important? Well, when we look at overcoming self-doubt, anxiety, depression comes from the past. We're often ruminating on past events that we cannot grab hold of. And we saw the details of the self-talk using a third-party perspective compared to a self-immersed first-party. Speaking to yourself this way allows you to rewrite the story internally about what happened in the past. And that is where we need to become the author of our stories. So to remember the true details, go back to that first lesson and say, oh yeah, I need to speak to myself this way, because then we move to the present. That is mainly where self-doubt lies. I don't know if I can do what's placed in front of me. And that study was reflective of, hey, we have the anger response. Again, natural predisposition. I'm going to test you. I'm going to try and make you angry. Within 45 seconds of pulling themselves out of themselves using a subjective spectating third-party perspective, they were able to calm themselves down and have a much lower anger response than those who were self-immersed with a first-party perspective. And then we move to the future, which is where anxiety lives. And we saw that that was based on anticipatory anxiety and how questions were asked to analyze our challenge versus our threat response. Can I do what's placed in front of me, or do I see it as a threat and I don't feel like I have the tool set to do that? The big things that we highlighted, again, go back and look at the details, but the big things that we highlighted, how do we ask those questions of ourselves? How well do I think I'm going to perform, or how stressful do I think this is going to be? Ooh, man, that highlights, okay, how do I need to ask these questions of myself to elicit the response that I want, to view life as a challenge or a threat, to then be able to go and do what is placed in front of me? That then brings us back to the present and say, no, I can view this as a challenge. I got this, let's go. Allows us to then act. That is how our words feed into our action, because they give us the confidence to do so as we build ourselves up with encouragement, with empowerment, to say, no, you can view this as a challenge. Let's go do this now. So go back to those studies and grab hold of how that subjective spectating helps you overcome ourselves in every mode of time, to grab hold of us, who we want to be, and the path through thought, words, and actions to get there. Super powerful, this tool of subjective spectating. And I mentioned a few terms in there, challenge versus threat. So let's talk about that a little bit. We have two definitions here. Let's look at challenge first. Challenge is the perception of the task as demanding but doable. Not to say this is easy. It's still going to push you, but you can do it. Why? Because you believe you have the tool set to do it. You now have the confidence, which we're going to talk about what that means, to actually go and do these things. You have improved cardiac efficiency and blood flow to the muscles and brain. This is now something that is facilitating performance while you tell yourself, again, here's that self-talk, my time to shine, baby. I got this. I'm not just going to prove to myself, but everybody else that's rooting for me, that I can do this. Let's go. That is the challenge perspective. And we need to be able to orient that perspective that we have on life as a challenge, because life is going to continue to put challenges in front of us, and we need to be able to respond Challenge accepted, baby. Let's go. In contrast to that, we have the threat response. And this is where we perceive the task as unmanageable. We don't believe that we have the tools to be able to overcome what is placed in front of us. We now have a decreased cardiac efficiency, higher blood pressure, which is not what we want. Both of these have increased blood flow, but one of them, the threat response, has decreased blood pressure, which decreases our performance. The biggest piece of this that I went into way too much depth on in the previous lesson on words, on actions, but we looked at perceived failure. So the studies here, and go back if you want more detail again, go review that. But the studies here focus that challenge versus threat response. You can do the same exact activity with nobody watching and view it as a challenge because there's no perceived failure. There's no judgment from anybody else. Nobody else is going to see this, so who cares? I'm just going to go do the best that I can. I'm going to learn from it. If I have to do it again, I'll do it better with the experience. The failure will teach me. There's no perceived judgment or failure from that activity. Now, you do that same activity in front of tons of people or somebody that you truly care about, what they think about you. Now I have the opportunity to fail and be judged by this person, and we start shrinking under that pressure of failure, thinking that judgment is going to define you through that person's eyes when it's not. We have to be able to orient ourselves to the challenge, whether we're by ourselves or in a group of people. And the way that we can do that, again, look at that line, perceived failure. It's not saying failure, it's saying perceived failure. We are perceiving, that is our perception, that is within our ability to choose and change. It comes to our thought process. It comes to our self-talk. That then allows us to dictate, is this having a perceived sense of failure or not? How am I viewing failure? How am I talking to myself about what I'm about to do? That then allows me to orient towards the challenge or see it as a threat. So now we're starting to see, okay, thought words absolutely lead to action. They're all coming together now. This has been placed in front of me. What are the emotions that arise that then control my thought process that leads to the self-talk of, ooh, Alex, I don't know you can, or hell yeah, baby, we can, that then allows us to perceive this as a challenge or a threat. It's all coming together, like I said, in real time, because that is how life happens. So as we grab hold of these tools, we create that space between stimulus and response. We speak to ourselves in an encouraging, uplifting manner. Now we can orient ourselves to the challenge that then allows us to go and do. And that is what everything rests on, is our actions. We have to be able to get ourselves moving, get out of the rut that we're in with self-doubt, anxiety, or depression, and say, you can do this. Growth mindset. You may not have done it before. It doesn't matter. Start from zero right now. This is your start point. Go and do, Alex. You got this. I believe in you. Perceive this as a challenge, because if you fail, it's just a learning opportunity. Go and do again and again and again until you need to, until it gets right. That's fine. This is completely random, but it just came to my head. The quote of, a warrior does not train until he can't, or a warrior does not train until he doesn't get it wrong. No, wait. I'm going to butcher this. A warrior doesn't train until he gets it right. A warrior trains until he doesn't get it wrong. And what that means is he fails over and over and over and over until he cannot get it wrong anymore. That is life. And if you ask anybody successful, that is what they will tell you. Anytime anybody asks me, like, Alex, how did you learn that lesson? My go-to response, repetitious failure. You just have to keep trying. There is nothing wrong with that. You learn, you pivot, you adjust, and you keep moving. You are, as we're going to talk about in the goals lesson and module, you are strict with your goal, but flexible with the means. Oh, this way didn't work very well. That kind of led to a failure. That's not where I want to go. Let's go this way. Ooh, not so much. Let's go this way. That's all failure is. So if we want to orient towards the challenge over the threat, we have to change that perspective, which starts in here, that then allows us to move forward. Now, again, I want to go back to the common humanity piece because we're going to lean on that a ton. I know, again, purposeful repetition. It takes a lot for us to hear in order to hold on to that and really soak it in. So purposeful repetition. Within our evolutionary predisposition towards the negative, the threat response is going to be the natural response to things. And this is what it says here about that. The threat reaction is grounded in our survival instinct. So that's natural. Again, go back to our survival mechanism. Same thing with our thoughts of 80% are negative. We're now seeing that in our actions based on how we perceive things, and that naturally is a threat. That's okay. So when life places the stimulus in front of you, that event that happens, and you do start feeling nervous and clamming up and getting cotton mouth and maybe start sweating, just recognize, hey, that's natural. Don't beat yourself up about that. That's just part of common humanity. Everybody has that. Here's what separates those that give in to the threat versus the challenge. While a challenge response is more conscious. So the threat response is natural. It is that predisposition towards, holy crap, life is a threat. Negative thought process, negative self-talk. That then leads to threat response of either no action or wrong action. What allows us to grab hold of that and recognize this threat response is not that big of a deal is creating space between stimulus and response, as we learned in our thoughts. Because now we can analyze this a little bit better. Because the body does not differentiate a threat of being chased by a bear and having to give a public speech. There's no difference there in the stress response, but there is in our reality. And so we have to be able to orient towards the challenge by grabbing hold of ourselves, creating that space between stimulus response and saying, hey, am I really being chased by a bear here? Or am I just nervous about doing what I'm about to do? That's okay. Most of the time, you're not being chased by a bear. Stay calm. Create that space. Speak to yourself as a loved one would, as you would to a loved one. Orient towards the challenge. Recognize it's natural to feel this way. Recognize that any failure that may come of this is a learning opportunity. And go and do. That is how all this comes together to get you to go and do. And as we start putting all of these things together and recognizing that this is how we act within life in real time, we begin to become anti-fragile. And I freaking love this definition of anti-fragility. This comes to us from Nassim Taleb, the actual term of anti-fragility. I then tweaked it to fit the stronger than your pain definition based off of everything that we've been talking about here. So it's all fluid, so we can see how it comes together. But Nassim Taleb coined this term anti-fragile, and I want you to think about, the potential opposites of anti-fragility. Number one being fragility. Think of the box that's being delivered by Amazon, right? It's got a big fragile sticker on there. And what does that mean? That means don't kick me. Handle me gently, because if you don't, I'll break. And as humans, we don't want to be that. We want to be strong, stronger than our pain. The next step up from fragility is resilient, which means, hey, buddy, kick me. Treat me harshly. I got this. No worries. But watch out for my breaking point because I have one. So don't kick me too hard. And that is so much better than being resilient. And I think that's where most of us find ourselves, is we're pretty damn tough. But we have a breaking point. Again, we're human. But how can we find a way to improve and say, hey, I want to be anti-fragile, which is no matter how hard you kick me, no matter what you place in front of me, no matter how much I may fail at something, it all makes me stronger. Stronger than what? Stronger than your pain. That is what all this is about. That is what anti-fragility is. That is what these tools of grabbing hold of your thoughts, speaking to yourself as a loved one, acting according to a challenge orientation that we are perceiving because we believe in ourselves, allows us to become as anti-fragile to become stronger than our pain. And here is my definition of anti-fragile based on everything we've talked about so far. Anti-fragility, as we define it, stronger than your pain defines it, is a combination of virtues such as commitment, commitment to your higher self, control as we create that space between stimulus and response, and challenge orientation. I freaking got this. That create the courage and discipline to turn potential tragedies into growth opportunities and act according to who we aspire to become. That is stronger than your pain, anti-fragility. We commit to our higher selves. We control our thoughts, words, and actions based on that higher vision. We then orient ourselves towards the challenge so we can go and do, and we get the courage and discipline to do what needs to be done, view potential tragedies and failures as growth opportunities to act towards the person we aspire to become. That is freaking beautiful. So now as we have to ask ourselves, well, Alex, how? And we covered this in more detail, but we have number one, Carol Dweck, growth mindset. We then have, go back to the story of the two wolves, right? We have the evil wolf within, that in our previous exercises, we did name to tame. That is Buster. That is who I have named as my evil wolf. I can visualize him now, take a subjective spectating perspective and say, no, Buster, you are not the one in charge of this conversation. I am. I then, as I starve him out and subtract him from the equation, I add in my good wolf, and that is the exercise of name to aim. I am aiming myself towards the best version of me, who I have given the name to as a third-party subjective spectator, Alexander Wolf, after the passing of my grandmother, Shirley Wolf. It's kind of an homage to who I was, who I don't want to be anymore, but I'm aiming myself towards who I should be. I'm adding him in and saying, okay, Alexander Wolf, we have starved out the evil wolf. I'm bringing you in. Now what? How do I act towards who I want to become, which is you, the best version of me? That then allows me to become anti-fragile. So that equation, growth mindset, where you are now is your start point. Make the next best decision. How do you do that? You starve out the evil wolf, you feed the good wolf, and you become anti-fragile. All to help you do what? Have the courage to act. And as we look at that word, we go back to the challenge orientation, real life. Courage is not the absence of fear. I'm not saying you need to view life as a challenge, which means you're never afraid of anything because you have such great self-confidence and almost a borderline arrogance to say, nah, I'm not afraid of anything. I can do anything that's placed in front of me. That is not natural. Arrogance is not something you want to have. You need to have a good balance of fear and belief in self to be able to do the right thing and recognize what is wrong. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the action in the face of it. That is stronger than your pain. Your pain is going to be there, but you now have the strength to overcome it. The nervousness, the anxiety is going to be there, even when you view things as a challenge, but you can say, I have the courage and the discipline to do what is necessary. Go and act. That is the whole purpose of anti-fragility, of all the tools up to this point, because action is what drives this entire mastery cycle forward. You can learn all the tools and take everything we've talked about in the thoughts and words lessons, but if you do not put them into action, they are pointless. Because knowledge is not power unless it is applied. Otherwise, it is useless data. So we have to have the courage to act. And that is the beauty of everything we've talked about so far coming into the equation of anti-fragility that really helps you become stronger than your pain. So now when we have this courage to act, we go and do. Let's talk about acting as if. I love this. So you've all heard the term fake it till you make it. And while I agree with that in its concept, I freaking hate that phrase, fake it till you make it, because we don't want to be faking anything. Faking removes the power from us. It makes us feel like we have imposter syndrome, makes us feel like we don't belong. Remove fake it till you make it. In place of that, replace it with act as if you are the person you are striving to become. So now when we go back to the mastery cycle, we're taking the current version of us out. We're naming to aim. We're looking at the best version of ourselves. We are putting that person inside the mastery cycle and saying, how would that person act? That is how I'm going to act right now. I may not be that person yet, but I'm going to act as if I am. We're not faking anything anymore. We are actively, consciously making the decision to do what we know we need to do to become. There is no imposter syndrome in that. There is no faking anything. There is no lying to ourselves about it. We are making the decision to become the best version of us, and that takes action. That is the beauty of the as-if principle. And as you look at the definition of it, and it comes down to our psychology versus our physiology, a lot of us think, hey, I will act as if when I feel like it. And if that's the case, truth be told, most of the time you're not going to feel like it, which means you're not going to do it. And I say that as one who found myself in that downward spiral during my dark moments of like, man, I'm just going to do this when I feel like it. And I never freaking felt like it. I never did anything. And I learned about this principle and was like, damn, that's eye-opening. And here is what that principle states. While our psychology begets our physiology, our mindset begets our physical nature, our actions, the physiology also begets our psychology. So the as-if principle states that when you feel happy, you smile. That is common sense. The as-if principle reverses that and says the opposite is true. When you smile, you feel happy. And that is the case. You may not feel like moving right now because you're tired, you're kind of lethargic, you've been like me sitting on my butt all day. I don't want to go to the gym, but man, when I go and do, it's like, okay, I'm here now. Let's freaking do this thing. I got the blood flowing, my endorphins are moving, my mentality is here. This feels good. Now I feel like it. Let's go. That action now dictates the thought process, the mentality, the emotions associated, because moving and acting releases hormones in the body. And we're going to see this as we wrap up the mastery cycle. Thought, word, action. Action, yes, then leads to habit, but action also leads to improved thought, which drives better self-talk, which then leads to better action, which improves our thought process. And it is that inner cycle that drives the total cycle of the mastery cycle forward. That's a lot of cycles. Pretty cool. We're going to look at that. But anyway, the as-if principle is extremely important because we need to close the gap between who we desire to become, the best version of us, and who we currently are. And the as-if principle acts as that bridge. What would this person do now? Great. I'm going to go and do. So that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when it comes to our actions, I want us to recap this and recognize, again, purposeful repetition. We're going to talk about this in each module, in almost every lesson, effort over outcomes. Because as we act towards that person that we're striving to become, we're not going to do a perfect job every single time. There are a lot of things out of our control. And I want us to think about it that way. Effort in becoming over outcomes of becoming. Because again, as we're going to talk about in our goals, I'm foreshadowing a lot here. While the goal and the achievement of the goal is important, what is more important is who you become as you strive to achieve that goal. That is the effort over outcome perspective. Because when we look at life, our actions, what we do in that moment is really all we control. And I think the best analogy that I heard for this is that of an archer. And again, I got a bow in here in my office. We got a coyote problem. I'm taking care of those things, all right? So my bow's ready to go. And as I'm practicing, I think about this effort over outcome perspective. And as you draw your bow back, you're doing everything right. Your stance is good. Your focus is good. Your breath is good. Your release is good. Everything is great. And it is heading right for that bullseye. And you're feeling good because you did everything right. And then a strong gust of wind comes and knocks it off course. Is that your fault? No. That's not your fault. So how then do you deal with that? Do you say, oh, damn it, I missed the target. I suck. Negative self-talk. Perceiving it as a threat. I failed. Or is it, ooh, I did everything right. That felt so good. What if that gust of wind wasn't there? Let's go again. Let's do this again. Let's go until we get it right because I did everything right. And that is it. That is all we can do in life. The outcome is not in your control. The effort is. And so we need to base our personal self-worth off of our efforts over the outcome. And Gandhi told us full effort is full victory, and that is how we need to view ourselves. If we are giving everything that we can, we need to view that as a victory. And I say it this way, 100% effort all the time. And I want to specify what I mean by that again. I'm not saying 100% of your 100% maximum capacity effort every time, because that is not human. We are human. We're going to have down days. What I mean by 100% effort is you have to give everything that you have in that moment, even if that 100% today is 75 of your 100% yesterday, is 60% of your overall max capacity effort. And as I shared, I'm making these videos for this master course at 4 to 6 in the morning. My sleep schedule is way off, man. I am not going to be at max capacity for the entire day, and I have to recognize that. Does that mean that I shirk my responsibilities and say, I'm too tired, I can't do that? No. That means that while I may only be able to give 60 to 75% of my full effort, I gotta freaking give it because it's 100% of what I have. And so at the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and say, Alex, today may have been rough. You may not have achieved everything you wanted to in regards to the outcomes you set, but you gave 100% effort and you can sleep soundly tonight. Let's go again tomorrow. That is the purpose of all this, because as we talked about, but we didn't necessarily cover in this review, when it comes to gaining confidence in ourselves, confidence etymology root word is confidere, with trust. How do you gain trust in yourself? The same way you gain trust in somebody else. So think about somebody that you trust with your life. How did they come to gain your trust? They probably did what they said they were going to do. And they kept their commitments to you and to everybody else. We have to do the same. So if we tell ourselves, I'm going to give 100%, you better freaking do it. If you tell yourself you're going to get up and go to the gym at 6 a.m., the only way to build confidence is to do that repeatedly. That is how we build good habits. Most importantly, it is how we build self-confidence. That belief in ourselves comes from proof. Confidence needs evidence. And that evidence on a daily, moment-to-moment basis is you giving 100% of what you have. Full effort is full victory. That will feed your confidence. That will help you remove anxiety. That will help you orient towards the challenge perspective. That will allow you to say, I know what the best version of me would do right now because I am getting closer and closer to that person. Let's go. Pulling it all together. All right. So we have talked about the mastery cycle. Thoughts become your words. Words become your actions. Actions become your habits. We see this in this cyclical manner. But what we're starting to recognize is that is not just the single mode of change from thought, word, action, habit, character, destiny. The way that I have experienced it, seen it, and teach it is, yes, thought, word, action, habit, character, destiny, but also, and more importantly, moment to moment to moment, thought, word, action, thought, word, action. Action feeds your thoughts. For example, I don't know if I can give this speech that has been placed in front of me, going back on the examples, the scientific studies that we reviewed. I don't know if I can do this speech that is placed in front of me. Create space between stimulus and response. Positive thought process. Overcome the natural negativity. Speak to yourself as a level 1. Alex, you got this, man. You've done everything up to this point. What makes you think you couldn't do this? Go for it, dude. Orient towards the challenge. If you mess up, that's fine. Use it towards a teaching perspective and learn from it. Do better next time. All right, go and do. You go and you do that thing. In the action of doing, you're removing anxiety because anxiety lives in the future. You close that anxiety off by acting in the now and being present, and you are proving yourself through your efforts of doing what you were afraid of, there's the courage to act and the anti-fragility. And you're saying, hey, look what I'm doing. I got this. That then feeds your thought process. Man, look what I did. Look at this. I actually went and did what I was afraid of. That's beautiful. Okay. You start thinking, what else can I do now? You start telling yourself, I don't know if there's a limit, man. And now you're going to go prove that to yourself through your actions. Whatever life places in front of you, you can do now. And you start gaining that confidence in yourself, that extreme reliability and trust. Because your thoughts feed your words, feed your actions, and those actions solidify the thought process of you can do this. Your words then begin to reflect that. Alex, you can do this. Your actions follow up with that. Watch me do this. I'm going to go do this. I did this. Wow, what else can we do? It feeds itself. And it drives the total mastery cycle forward, because from there, thought, word, action, action to thought, and it continues to move forward. Now we start over time creating good habits. That then turns into the good character of the person that you want to become. You're closing that gap between current you and future you, ultimately reaching your desired destiny. And here is what that looks like in these very artistic concentric circles that I've drawn. On the left-hand side, we have the black circles. The right-hand side, we have the gold. That gold circle is the best version of you that you are striving for as you work on thought, word, action, back to thought, word, action, moment to moment to moment. That is what drives the mastery cycle forward. And yes, this is linear, and life is not linear, but it is a good representation of how over time you close that gap. And it is going to take a lot of iterations. It is going to take a lot of time. It is going to take a lot of effort. But as you continually do these things, you close the gap between left side current you, right side best version of you, and that is where we begin to find purpose, usefulness, and happiness in life, is as we close that gap. And so as we look at, okay, what is the process? Because again, process needs to prove the outcome. The outcome is the organic byproduct of our daily process. We keep doing this, bam, 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 and we close that gap. And this is how our thoughts, words, and actions become our destiny. And how often do we have to do this? Moment to moment to moment. And my friend, it's all on you. And I know that that's scary. It's a lot of freaking pressure. But you are stronger than that pain. You are stronger than the pressure. We need to recognize that while it's scary, it's liberating, because now we can see nobody can tell you how to think. Nobody can tell you how to speak. Nobody can tell you how to act. And therefore, nobody has control over your destiny but you. Your destiny is in your hands based on how you think, speak, and act right freaking now. And again, purposeful repetition here. It's all on you. Grab hold of that power. Recognize that as a challenge. Say to yourself, challenge freaking accepted. I can do this. I want to do this. I may not know how yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Growth mindset. You can do this, dude. Starve out the evil wolf. Feed the good wolf. Become anti-fragility and truly stronger than your pain, and recognize you can do this. I believe in you. You need to believe in you. How do you do that? You act. You build that self-confidence. You freaking got this. That's the summary. There's a lot there, but I freaking love it. Let's get to the exercise. I love this exercise. Again, in the previous lessons, 1, 2, and 3, thought, word, action, we did more of the exercises that were like, hey, this is a tool you can use in real time. This exercise is one that is a little bit more introspective, that I want it to help you gather who I am now. What are some good traits that I have? What are some traits that I don't have, but that I want in the best version of me? How can I start visualizing the movement between who I am now and who I am capable of becoming? And so this one is a virtue test. And it's quick. It's 15 minutes. You go to viacharacter.org and just take the free virtue test. Go in and it's going to ask you questions. Answer them as instinctively as you can, because that's the best way. I try and go through it as fast as I can so that I can, kind of give a knee jerk of like, hey, this is me. Like, don't necessarily put too much thought into it, because you want to get a real response of how do I really respond to the question that they're asking me, rather than, ooh, how would I want to respond? Because those are two very different things. And if you want, and I have done this, go take the knee jerk reaction of like, ooh, fill it out as fast as you can, and then think, how would I like to respond to this, and contrast them. It's actually pretty freaking cool. So as you do that, you get a visual of who you are in here, because that's where our virtues lies. People don't necessarily see virtues unless what? We're acting on them. And that is what this whole thing has been about, is the importance of our actions, right? Thought, words, actions. That's what drives this thing forward. So you need to act on these virtues. But first we need to recognize what are our strengths. And that's what this focuses on. So when I did mine, it's going to divide them up into 5 different categories: courage, humanity, temperance, justice, and transcendence. It's a very stoic approach that has been brought forward into modern day psychiatry and science. And it's going to go through and it's going to list your top 5 virtues. And then it's going to categorize from there, hey, you have these, but not necessarily as strengths that match your top 5. And yes, you can always go work on your weaknesses, but a good starting point is to emphasize your strengths. What are you good at? What makes you feel good that's going to allow you to continue forward? Because if we're constantly focused on, I need to improve, that comes from that negative predisposition of only focusing on the negative, on the weaknesses. We need to focus on the strengths, make the conscious decision to do that. And as we start grasping these strengths here, then we can say, okay, I've got these nailed down. I'm comfortable. What can I work on to turn some of these weaknesses now into strengths? So as you go to viacharacter.org, take the test one of 2 ways and see what pops out. And then I want you to come back and tell me, what are your top 5? Here are mine. Honesty. And no matter how I've taken this test, whether it's knee-jerk, whether it's very methodical, whether it's one week at the next, honesty is always my top virtue. I have to be honest. I need other people to be honest. That is a big one for me. My next one is love, which I didn't see. But I think as you can kind of see throughout this mastery series, the common humanity, which is where love lies, is really important to me. I want to relate to you. I want to empower you. I want to encourage you. I want to believe in you. And all of that is wrapped up into love. And I didn't necessarily like that at first. I was like, I feel like that should be lower on my list. But man, I am so grateful now, as I've come to lean into my top 5, that is one of them, because that is so important. Humility. I really try and lean on that too. And again, I see the actual reflection of this. I want to be humble. I want to be confident. I don't want humility to stifle my confidence. But in order to be relatable to people, we have to recognize that there's always something to learn from others. And so humility is the best way to be open to that. And so that is a really important one for me. Leadership, I love that. Leadership across the board is important to me. I think there's 2 sides to leadership. One is leading, and the other is being led when it's time to be led. I think that comes into the humility piece, but leadership is extremely important to me, because I think it is the bridge across all self-improvement. And then spirituality, which is transcendence. And yes, that is very, very important to me. It is how I got through my suicidal depression. It is how I recognized my true value is I am a spiritual being living a physical experience, not the other way around. And we're going to talk about that as we get to the next module of Inner Mountains of Mastery. The spiritual life is the highest form of living, but it cannot be achieved until we have gotten to some point on the physical, mental, emotional, and intuitional mountains. We have to use a physical mountain to prove to ourselves, as we talked about here, giving ourselves the evidence that we can do things. That then stabilizes our mental and emotional capacity and allows us to strengthen our mental and emotional being. Through that process, we gain trust in ourselves by proving that we can rely on us. That then becomes our intuition, which then allows us to live a higher life of spirituality. We start looking inward. We start looking for purpose. We start recognizing the higher power in our lives. We start letting go of the things that we can't control, and we give them to whatever higher power that is. Spirituality is very important to me, and I think that it allows us to recognize common humanity, to love more, to be more humble, recognizing we can't do everything on our own. That is important to me. So as I recognize these in myself, it's like, oh yeah, that's really cool. And you know what? I think if I wanted to visualize the best version of me, how would that man embody these things? All right, let me describe that a little bit more and get more familiar with the best version of me. Now, how can I start closing that gap? Looking at the concentric circles, how do I go from the left-hand black circle all the way to the right-hand gold circle? How do I close that gap? And so this virtue test allows us to get that internal vision, at least start getting it, into who I am and who can I become. Go do that. Let me know what your top 5 are. I am so grateful and appreciative of you and what you're doing to become the best version of you, to truly become stronger than your pain. This is a lot, and it is an ongoing process. I encourage you to come back to these as needed and recognize it's not going to happen overnight. This is a process, and life is chaotic, and you are going to trip and make mistakes. But if you break that word down of mistake, it is a mistake. Run it back. Do it again, this time with the experience and knowledge that that failure taught you, and do it again. That's what this life is comprised of, but recognize you are in control. The destiny that you desire, the person that you want to become, it's all on you, and you can get there by controlling your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Thank you for spending so much time with me in this, but most importantly, thank you for spending so much time on you to become stronger than your pain and develop the strength for 2. Thank you. All right, my friend, I will see you in the next freaking module. The inner mountains of mastery. How do we take the mastery cycle and start acting on it and across our inner mountains of physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual to then find our way into the final module of forging the optimal you. Can't say it enough. I'm grateful for you, and I'll see you next week.